To break it all down now, let's bring in Molly Hooper. She's here, Capitol Hill reporter for The Hill, and she joins us now from our Washington bureau. Thanks for joining us, Molly. Let's start with Jeff Flake and Lindsey Graham. These were two senators that voted for the Republican health care bill that ultimately failed in the Senate. What do you make of the president's decision to go after them? Doesn't he need every single vote?
He does need every single vote, but at this time when, he's getting attacked by all sides from a lot of members of his own party, it's recess. The House and the Senate, they are not voting right now, and these are two individuals in the Senate who I would think maybe President Trump feels can be a bit gratuitous when it comes to calling him out. Jeff Flake just wrote a book basically telling his Republicans that they should challenge President Trump when they need to, and they should have done more to stop him during the primary season. So he has bones to pick with both of these individuals, so it's kind of low-hanging fruit if you're a frustrated president with members of your party.
Molly, let's share a new CBS News poll that's out this morning that shows a majority of Americans disapproved of the president's response to Charlottesville, but that a majority of Republicans approved of it. So how do you see GOP lawmakers threading this needle? In other words, they are looking at these very same poll numbers, and there's been a lot of criticism at some Republican lawmakers, specifically Paul Ryan, who did not call the president out by name. Are they looking at this number and saying that's because my constituents, at least my party, is okay with what the president said?
Well, I mean, that's something that I've been hearing over and over and over and over and over again. And wait a second, one more time over. Every time, members of Congress go home for their recess, their district work periods, and President Trump tweets something that catches fire in the Twitter world and goes all over social media, and you think, oh, it's going to be the end for him and Republicans are going to call him out. They come back from that district work period saying, oh, constituents still love him. They're not talking about Russia. They're not talking about these investigations. They want to know about jobs, the economy, what's going on with health care. So, and that's the one thing that's been sort of unusual is that, as the rest of the world is kind of, fomenting, unrest about this, members are really hearing from their constituents that it's the local issues and they want jobs in the economy. So as long as those issues, the jobs front's getting better and people are, feel that the economy is going in the right direction, Republicans aren't hearing so much about Donald Trump. He's maintaining that base of support, which is why you don't see a lot of them calling him out. That said, the Republicans who have been vocal, and there have been, nearly two to three dozen, well, probably more like 2 dozen of them, who've spoken out against President Trump recently, these recent remarks. They're in sort of purpley blue states, districts, and when it comes to, say John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Jeff Flake, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, some of the people who called him out for these recent ones, keep in mind they did run, some of them did run against him in the primary election. I mean, if you're Lindsey Graham, I'm surprised Donald Trump didn't say in the tweet, well, he's still mad that I gave his phone number out. It's an unusual situation right now for the Republican Party, but what they're hearing at home is reflected in what they say back here when they get back to D.C.
So as we mentioned in a tweet earlier today, the president criticized the removal of Confederate statues this morning, and he weighed in on that issue during his press conference on Tuesday. Let's just remind everybody what he had to say on Tuesday, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
This week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Should statues of Robert E. Lee stay up?
I would say that's up to a local town, community, or the federal government, depending on where it is located.
All right, so there you have it. The president equating Robert E. Lee to George Washington and to Thomas Jefferson. It certainly appears as if he doesn't quite understand why those counter-protesters headed out into the streets in Charlottesville when they did, that it wasn't just about the statue. Yep. So why repeat this same comment? Why this strategy? Obviously, he was heavily criticized for it when he said it on Tuesday.
Well, that is a good question. And remember that over and over comment I made? That's the same kind of feeling that I do hear from members up on Capitol Hill. Democrats sort of do it gleefully, like, oh, he's doing it again. Republicans sort of shaking their head, what is he doing? You know, he likes to sort of take these issues that are causing, you know, Republicans a lot of headaches and just beat them to death, it feels like, and keep bringing them up when really it probably would be better if he just stop talking about it. And so that is something that I have heard lawmakers privately say. He just needs to quit. He needs to move on and quit fixating on these things. You know, focus on these issues. Focus on legislation. Focus on tax reform. Focus on, you know, his signature issue, building the wall. You know, those are things that resonate more with people at home. And in any case, it's a good question.
You know. It's interesting, Molly. You made a good point about the poll that shows that 67% of Republicans are okay with the president's words on Charlottesville. There's a fascinating interview that his advisor, Steve Bannon, gave to a left-leaning magazine. He contradicts the president on a number of issues, but he does talk about the fact that if race is at the center of the discussion, then that will give the president at least some cover when it comes to some of these other issues that he's more interested in. In other words, Steve Bannon is more interested in getting across. And just recently, the Daily Mail has an interview also with Steve Bannon. And in that interview, the Daily Mail says that Mr. Bannon told them that he's drawing fire away from President Trump. So if Republicans feel comfortable that he's going to bring jobs back, if the stock market continues to do well, which the president tweets about on a regular basis, all this other stuff, which for a lot of Americans is abhorrent, but for those Trump supporters, they don't care because he's their guy. He's going to build a wall. He's going to bring jobs back. He's going to bring coal back, and the stock market continues to do well.
But guess what? Has the wall been built? No, not yet. Has the and he's had opportunities to build that wall. There have been opportunities when the government could have shut down, you know, because he wanted more funding for building this wall. You know, yes, we've seen the stock market go up, but how does that play back home? I mean, that's, you know, the stock market is this big New York financial thing, but does that translate back in Main Street, USA? And so that's really the question is, you know, these jobs that he talks about, Foxconn going to Wisconsin. Okay, how many people were hired? When are they going to get these jobs? When are they going to come off of unemployment? And I know that the unemployment figures are going up, but again, this goes back to something that a lot of lawmakers have said, you know what, it's kind of a tricky figure because, you know, the unemployment number is the people who are working, who are actually actively looking for jobs and haven't, you know, stopped looking. So, I mean, it's a very unusual time right now, and I don't know if Republicans are necessarily comfortable that the president's going to do all these things, but you know, they're there for self-preservation. They want to win their election. They want to keep their jobs. And so a lot of what we hear back up on Capitol Hill from Republicans reflects what they're hearing from the people that will, hopefully, in their cases, vote for those lawmakers.
I mean, at the end of the day, even if Mr. Bannon thinks that, you know, we're not talking about Russia today because we're focusing on this, it doesn't really matter because there is Robert Mueller and he's doing his job. And I'm sure that he and his investigators would prefer for this to not be on the front pages of newspapers and in the rundowns of television news reports so that they can continue to do their work and come up with what it is that they find.
Well, and it's kind of interesting, and this is just speculation on my part, and armchair psychoanalyzing. But, you know, I mean, for President Trump, too, he hates the Russia story. And, I mean, this is not a comfortable story that's going on, you know, with what happened in Charlottesville. But at least he doesn't have to discuss, you know, Russia and what's going on with collusion and whatnot. And so it could be, for him, just a break. I mean, it doesn't seem like a very pleasant one. But, you know, it's August.
It's like, but it's weird. It's like...
He knows, it appears as if anyways, he knows what to say on this topic that appeals to his base.
That's true. With
Russia is a little more murky.
Although it's weird, it's hard to say, look, I don't want. It's hard to say, look, I don't want a discussion about how people in my administration or in my campaign may have colluded with a foreign power.
Totally.
I'd rather be focused on, you know, this discussion that
left.
people have about me saying things that support neo-Nazis and racists.
Right.
Well, and frankly, for members of Congress, and I was actually talking to one lawmaker who thought, hey, well, you know, it's not a good issue. It's tough to talk about, but at least we don't have to defend what's going on with health care. You know, I mean,
Wow.
because if you listen to some of these town hall meetings, you know, the Charlottesville issue has come up, and you know, but Republicans are still getting hammered on what's going on with health care and what about members of Congress health care, and so it just makes for it's sort of this August surprise that sometimes happens with members, you know, with the president. I mean, look at Katrina happened at this time, you know, for President George W. Bush, and it just, you know, people go home thinking that they're going to be talking about the issues that are going on in D.C. and something happens and it all just changes.
Right, indeed. Molly Hooper of The Hill, thank you so much, Molly.
Absolutely, thank you.